All right, we're going to give you guys a quick little short lesson in geomancy. So for those of you who don't know anything about geomancy, it's the study of and then the application of that knowledge. The study of the Earth's geography, but the sort of pressure points, energy points, ley lines, biome rings, so on and so forth. So these are all over the world, and if you look, you can find maps of ley lines and geomancy lines throughout the world. But we're going to focus on, we'll show that one in a minute. Focus on North America and specifically North Carolina. So here, I'll show you guys. So here's one book. There's a lot of books out there on geomancy. Feel free to pick one up. Even if you don't believe in it, lots of people out there do, and lots of people act accordingly, okay? That's something you guys really need to keep in mind. Too many of you don't take others seriously because you think that what they believe is silly. Okay, what they believe might be silly, but they're not necessarily silly, and they might be doing serious things based on what they believe. So anyway, here's one book you could pick up. There's so many ley lines. This one's called Ley Lines and Earth Rings of America. And you can see here some of the rings are, Earth crystal ring, a biome ring, Earth core ring, moon ring, tectonic plate ring. And when they a lot of them sort of center or intersect in certain spots, those can be special spots. When the outer edges, when they just sort of lay across certain areas, certain towns, certain mountain ranges and such, the outer rings even, those typically have some kind of special something about them, an energy to them, particularly where lots of these rings overlap. So, for example, Naica crystals, I think. The Naica crystal caves are right here down in Mexico, and you can see it's within lots of these rings. It's got a crystal ring around it, it's got a biome ring around it, it's got an earth core ring around it, a moon ring, and it's within a tectonic ring. So that's one example. Now, I want to come over here and look at Pilot Mountain. So I captured some closer images of this. Let's go back. Here we go. So you can see actually how the Bermuda Triangle is not far off the coast of North Carolina, first of all. And you can see that in geomancy, those that are concerned with geomancy in North America, the North Americas and the East, they would know about the Pilot Mountain Wheel is what it's called. So Pilot Mountain is located in North Carolina. Here's the Pilot Mountain Wheel. I have a few different images saved of this, and we'll look at all of them. And you can see Pilot Mountain itself is up in northwest area of North Carolina. But you can see that the wheel, the outer edge of the wheel, overlaps over Cedar Island there. And Pilot Mountain itself is not far away from High Point, North Carolina, and Thomasville, North Carolina, which is the official sort of living addresses of David Saintsing. We'll see more detailed maps. So here's one. There we go. And again, you can see the outer circle overlaps over to, off on the right, overlaps over Cedar Island. The center of the wheel is Pilot Mountain. So that's considered to be a high energy place. Lots of people who are concerned with this sort of thing would go out of their way to be able to have control over some of these areas so that they can influence these areas with whatever energies they choose. Again, it doesn't matter if you believe in it. It matters, do other people believe in it, and what are they willing to do? What are they willing to put their resources into? There's Cedar Island right there. I have a better one. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to show you some of these before I talk a bit more on it. This one isn't Cedar Island, actually. This one is up north of New Jersey. This is like Massachusetts area. This was meant to be sort of another example of an energy point, a pressure point of the earth. And here's a picture of Pilot Mountain. This is what it looks like. And like a little nub sticking out of the ground. So here's the up-close picture that I wanted to show you guys. You can see Pilot Mountain there in northwest North Carolina. You can see that one of the sort of the spokes of that wheel comes down through Cape Fear. And then the outer rim of that wheel overlaps right over Cedar Island, North Carolina. There you go. Makes me wonder what they've got going on up here at the center point. And then again, right about here, right about like, just sort of southeast of Pilot Mountain, not very far southeast of Pilot Mountain, is High Point, North Carolina, which is where David Saintsing has another resort. And Thomasville, North Carolina is just south of there, which is where David Saintsing told me that he grew up. So you can see here, there's High Point. And then up just north of Winston-Salem, between Winston-Salem and Mount Airy, that's where Pilot Mountain is. And then just south of High Point is Thomasville, where David Saintsing grew up. And then we've got, there will be Cedar Island on the very tippy tip there. So it makes me wonder, was I being, like I said, I started to feel like I was being used in some way for some kind of ritual, perhaps, like an unwitting tool in some sort of ritual that involved people being used sort of as placeholders, as like symbols in that ritual. So imagine like if, you're in your church or your synagogue or your mosque or whatever, and, your holy man, he does all kinds of things and he uses all kinds of props, like maybe an incense burner or something. Okay, well, what if instead of using an incense burner, they used a person to symbolize whatever the incense burner symbolized, What if that person just stood there and like danced around or something? I don't know. What if the person was considered to be the person who swings the incense burner around? What if they're considered to be a part of that or something? Do you understand what I'm saying? So they could make these rituals happen on a much bigger scale than just inside of a room in a building with a group of parishioners. So again, there's High Point, and then in between Winston-Salem and Mount Airy is Pilot Mountain, and then just south of High Point, not far south of High Point, is Thomasville. Yeah, I really started to get the creeps, very creepy feelings, like I was being used for something and gawked at. In some ways, kind of like freak on display, in a little bit, and still trying to put words to some of the feelings that I was getting. So And also trying to separate it from ego and trying to go like, how much of this is ego and me thinking the world's all about me, and how much of this is like legitimately like it really felt like, I was kind of on display to some degree, especially when David was down on the weekend, on like weekends that he was down, and especially the night that Buttercup disappeared and Buck was sick. Something about all that felt really like the stuff that we did with Buck, and having me walk around the mounting block so many times in the back, walk the horse around the mounting block. And I started singing to Buck because I started making up little songs for the horses. I started making one up for Buck and singing to him softly, hoping like that would make him feel better. And Jorge didn't like want me singing to him. And after I went around the block so many times, he stopped me. And and here's the thing is, a lot of my research also goes back to horse rituals and ancient Aryan horse rituals, horse sacrifice rituals and all that. So I'm starting to look into that again some more. I mean, I sort of touched upon it maybe almost a year ago. Briefly looked into some of the horse rituals and sacrifices and things that they used to do thousands of years ago. And a lot of this I'm tracing back to these civilizations, the ancient Aryan civilizations that existed roughly between the European steppes and Western India. They would have spoken mostly a basic Sanskrit type language and Proto-Indo-European derived languages, and there was a lot of horse worship, horse sacrifice, rituals that involved horses, religious stories, and just folklore type stories also that involved horses. And a lot of the folklore stories, a lot of like the Disney stories that we have, are actually derived from these stories. So, like they had the evil stepmother and the stuff like that. These basic stories have not died. They've just been reborn over and over again for thousands of years. So, sorry, without prattling too much, this is just supposed to give you sort of a little tiny crash course in some geomancy and how actually North Carolina and Cedar Island, North Carolina, are very important compared to lots of other places on the planet. Cedar Island, North Carolina, is actually quite a little place of power, I would say. It's probably would be seen by people who are into geomancy as being a power point, a sort of earth pressure point. Also, just sort of the geography, how it's laid out. The island is sort of jutting up into water and it's upward pointing. So I'm sure I'll be making more videos getting into more detail about this as I order my thoughts on it more. But just to show this little bit here. Remarking upon how cults, little underground cults and networks like to form communities and how they tend to gravitate towards certain spots. Things like geomancy and energy points along ley lines and stuff and the earth grid, those sorts of things are quite often what dictate where these little cults will gravitate towards. So like I said, Cedar Island would be a place, a huge Mecca type place. I know there probably would be many more if you looked at the map, but still out of everywhere in the world, there really would only be a few places that these lines overlap with. And very few of them would have the same kind of special geography, you could say, that Cedar Island has. So it's very sort of upward pointing phallic into water. type of geography there, just as the my hometown where I come from is sort of downward pointing phallic into water. If you look at a map and look at Cape May, New Jersey, it's the most southern tip of New Jersey. And then look at where it falls on the map compared to Cedar Island, North Carolina. Cape May is actually farther east than Cedar Island, North Carolina. But they're not very far. They're not as far apart as you would think for a 9-hour drive. 9.5 hour drive.